Dear viewers, I thought that I should make an update after my rather successful previous video on the tactical analysis of the Russian victory in the Ukrainian Sudzha salient. Not because it is totally wrong, far from it, but some clarification is definitely needed. However, recently I struggled with the rather stubborn flu, which can be heard in my voice. I made this video in order to make things clear. In order to understand this video, it is a must to watch the previous one, because without that it will be hardly understandable. Most importantly, I must admit that I indeed made a mistake. I stated incorrectly that 30% of the Russian stormtroopers did not come out alive from the gas pipeline. Open sources made available on this topic made it clear that albeit a significant part of the troops got sick, but there were no or very limited fatal accidents happened. Therefore, in this regard, I made a mistake. But all my other claims and deductions regarding on land forces operations were correct. In this video, I will prove it based on enemies, yes, Russian sources. And if you don't believe me, I put all the sources in the description of this video. Since I was talking about the gas pipeline attack, let's stick to this topic for a while. The Russian meal blogger channel Dva Mayora was the first publishing this event. They said that a company worth of infantry managed to infiltrate the Ukrainian lines this way. Ukrainian official sources claim that all these forces had been destroyed, which was clearly not true based on the events of the coming days. Of course, links of these two claims are in the description. As we all know, on the 9th of March, the Ukrainians withdrew from Malaya Lochnya and Cherkasskoye Parechnoye. According to Russian meal bloggers, on the 8th, the bulk of the Ukrainian forces withdrew from these battle positions, while a smaller element remained in them until the dawn of the 9th of March. The advancing Russian units could capture these positions only after all Ukrainian units withdrew from there. Well, dear viewers, this is the perfect description of a delaying action from the enemy's perspective. Of course, the sources of all the Russian claims are in the description. Believe it or not, according to both warring parties' sources, in these days and in this sector, the Ukrainians executed a successful delaying action at the tactical level. As we all know for now, the Russians emerged from the gas pipeline in pretty good shape. It is even supported by the fact that these Russian infantry units captured the small railway station of Zazulevka. But what is also a hard fact, that according to the Chechen fighters of the 1434th Akhmat Regiment, they captured Martinovka only after the Ukrainian forces left the town. And the Russians also tell us that Kozacha Lochnya and Bogdanovka was firmly in Ukrainian hands, however heavy clashes were ongoing throughout the whole day. Of course, all sources in this regard are in the description. It is also a big fat lie of the Kremlin that Sudzha was captured on the 10th of March. According to the well-informed and trustworthy meal blogger channels Dva Mayora and Arvoyankor, on this day fierce fighting was going on in the northeastern suburbs of the town, as the Ukrainian Special Forces, elements of the 78th Air Assault Brigade, clashed with the Russian 11th VDV Brigade, the Chechen Regiment, and the 15th Motorized Rifle Brigade. On the 11th of March, the Russians captured Kozacha Lochnya and closed in on the eastern suburbs of the town. This could have been a good opportunity to create the hundreds or thousands of trapped Ukrainians appeared in the idiotic claims of Trump or the Kremlin. But neither the Ukrainians, and what is more important, nor the Russians did not mention anything like this. All of that means that only two things could happen. 1. The retreating forces of the 95th Air Assault Brigade got destroyed. In case of this, we could have seen dozens of Ukrainian prisoners of war and dead, and lots of destroyed armored vehicles. But we saw only two destroyed Striker APCs and casualties, altogether hardly more than a platoon. All of this clearly means that the battalion of the 95th did not get destroyed here, however they indeed suffered some serious losses. But the truth is that the bulk of the still combat-capable elements had withdrawn west of Sudzha and later back to Ukraine, exactly like I said in my previous video. Of course, sources are in the description. So, as we all know for now, by the beginning of the 12th of March the Ukrainian forces withdrew from the northern and eastern perimeter of Sudzha. This is supported by the fact that this is the first day when we received reports from Russian forces calmly walking in these parts of the town, while we also received reports from heavy clashes in the western bank of the Sudzha river, inside the town and in Goncharovka. Exactly like I said in my previous video, and of course, sources are in the description. Hence the data cutoff date of my previous video is the 14th of March. I would like to use this update to examine the events a bit further. On the 14th, heavy clashes were ongoing in the southwestern outskirts of Sudzha, in the border village of Basivka, and along the Psio river near the village of Guyeva. According to the Kremlin, the Russians' intention was to push the Ukrainian forces out from Russia at once and to create a defensive cordon in order to prevent Ukrainian attacks inside Russia like this. Therefore, on the 15th of March, the Russians maintained the pressure. They attacked unsuccessfully near Zhuravka and Basivka. According to Russian sources, a mechanized infantry platoon of the 11th VDV Brigade managed to advance up to Gogoyevka along the N07 highway. However, I could not find any evidence pro or con. The Russians exerted serious pressure on the Ukrainians from the east also. The 810th Naval Infantry Brigade advanced a bit west of Makhnovka, while assault groups of the 177th Naval Infantry Regiment, after 10 days of relentless assaults, managed to grab a foothold at the western bank of the Psio River in the forest north of Guyeva. According to a Russian source that I put in the description, on the 16th the Russians indeed captured Gagoyevka, but here they could not advance further. On the western flank of the Russian attacks, an assault group reached the border guard checkpoint, but it had been beaten back by Ukrainian drone attacks. According to my analysis, this is no surprise. As the Russians advance, their electronic warfare assets seemingly cannot keep up with the pace, albeit it is not that fast. The other reason is that on the eastern flank the terrain favors the defender. Surprise, surprise, tactical level land forces operations are heavily influenced by the terrain. On the 17th of March, the data cutoff day of this video, the situation was fluid and the battle was far from over. In Guyeva, a Russian flag appeared, but later it turned out that it was planted by a drone. Of course, source in the description. However, in spite of the lack of evidence of the Russian presence, I consider this part to be in the gray zone, because we have no evidence of the Ukrainian presence either. All in all, I think that I achieved the goal that I set at the beginning of this video. I provided evidence and I made analysis based on that about what had really happened in the Sudzha salient in the first half of March. It is crystal clear that the Russians achieved a significant operational level victory, exactly like I said in my previous video. But it is also crystal clear that the Russian Voyenkors began to report on thousands of encircled Ukrainian troops after the announcement of Trump and Putin. Some Russian meal bloggers claimed on the 12th and 13th of March Russian forces encircled an unspecified number of Ukrainian forces in an unspecified area of the Kursk region. But many Russian meal bloggers published maps on the 13th and 14th of March acknowledging that the Ukrainian forces have viable egress routes back into the Sumy region from their remaining positions. This binding to the Kremlin's narrative is no surprise, considering the fact that the Russian media is anything but free. I don't know whether Trump's announcement on thousands of encircled Ukrainian troops was just a part of some communication warfare or some twisted psychology game towards the Kremlin. But what I surely know and proved that this was far from the truth. Well, that is all what I wanted to say for now. Thank you very much for watching for this long. If you think my job worth it, please give this video a like or subscribe to my channel. If you have anything to add, I am more than happy to see it in the comments. Thank you and see you soon.